They helped build Russia not by force, but by love and brotherhood. These were the words of Putin when he spoke about the contributions of Black Russians throughout Russia's glorious history. Putin, speaking in front of a delegation of African Union leaders, spoke on how ancient Africans entered Russia and helped create the Russian civilization. Is Putin one of the only leaders of the world who recognize the contributions of the Black people of this planet? Study, for the more you study, the more options you will have. And the more options definitely means the more power.
Was Russian created or put together by a black man or a man of African descent? This is what we'll be deliberating upon today because of this young Russian lady. I'm going to leave her videos there so that you also look into it. She spoke about the fact that there is this, ancient relationship between Russia and black people or African for a long time. A relationship that cannot just be cut off because it has to do with who they are as Russians. And this is not just about the man who made this whole thing happen, Alexander Pushkin. I think a lot of us have heard about him. We know who he is, the fact that he has a grandfather who is African. That is to say, he is of the line, the bloodline of African is running through his veins. And when you look into the Russian languages, now, when we were talking about the evolution of languages, there was a video I made about the fact that Hebrew and other ancient languages has African, what do you call it, touches around them. And I don't know, maybe I'm going to leave the video somewhere so that you get to it. The fact that all these languages are African. Yes, yes. Now, the truth is that when you look into the past, now, according to her, there is this relationship that ancient cordial relationship that the Russians have with the black people, the fact that they respected black people. And this is what is pushing my mind to what Putin did not long ago about how Putin came out and exposed to the world the hypocrisy of white supremacy. And for the recent years, we've seen the relationship between Russians and African countries, how they've come out openly to show their support to African countries. Even very recently, we are seeing how Russia is supporting the Sahel, that is liberating themselves from the hold of colonialism and Western subjugation and powers. Now, when you look into what Putin did, exposing to the whole world that Yeshua wasn't a white man, no, but he is a black man. We see that, of course, this information that the Russians have connection to. In as much as when you talk about the evolution of the Russian language from the 9th century through, 18th century and the 19th century where Alexander got involved in, you discover that it evolved gradually and that it wasn't just Alexander Pushkin who had influenced the Russian language. There were others like, Cyril and Methodius, and others, about two, three of them before Alexander in the 19th century. But the fact that this very man who had influenced this language not so long ago is a man who had the DNA of the African in him. Now, this debate is going further to, expose to the world, according to her, that it's not just the fact that Alexander has a great grandfather that is African, but the truth is that the modern day Russian language has something of African in it. And I was a little bit wondering, because if we are always, waiting for the truth or struggling for the truth, why should it be hurting to hear that the Russian language itself has something of African in it? Because if this is the truth, then I don't see why there should be agitation. There should be, some unsettlement okay, on the internet, if this is the truth.
Did you know that Pushkin, who was part black Russian poet, basically formed Russian language? And I'm right now in St. Petersburg in an apartment where he died. Pushkin basically formed Russian language. He removed outdated church Slavonic elements. He showed that one can write in such a way that aristocrat and peasant can understand at the same time. Turgenev later said that it was Pushkin who gave final form to our language. By the way, I had an opportunity to go to Pushkin Museum, and this is his actual chair that he was sitting on when he was working. And this is a cast of his face that was done after he died. And now you will see a couch that he spent his last days on, and a place where he died. Pushkin's key innovation was blending everyday spoken Russian language with formal literary language. Before Pushkin, these two styles were kept completely separate. And yes, Pushkin had African roots. This is his great-grandfather on the mother's side, Abram Petrovich Ganibal. The amount of people who got so offended about my video about Russian part black poet who basically formed Russian language is insane. First, I have a question for you. Why does it even offend you so much? You are not even Russian, you have nothing to do with Russia, you have nothing to do with Russian history, and you have nothing to do with Russian language. So if me, a Russian person who was born and raised in Russia, if it doesn't offend me, and I personally don't know a single Russian who finds it offensive or something, why do you care so much? And there are many people who say that he wasn't even black, that he is 100% white. First, a little information for you that he did get bullied by some people because of his looks and that he looked different. He had very curly hair, and the thing that even though he got bullied, he still loved his roots and he was proud of his roots. So if he himself is telling you guys where he's coming from, why are you all in denial? And his grandfather had a very interesting life, and I'm gonna make another video on him later. Russians are racist towards black people. Funny enough, if you read comments under my Pushkin video, you will see that yes, there are many racist people and none of them is Russian. And actually in Russia, majority of people don't care about what your race is. The only thing is that in Russia, there is very small percentage of black people. And I had a bunch of comments from people traveling to Russia, and majority of them had positive experience, and they all say that it was actually pretty good and they didn't experience any racism, as you say here. So yeah, I have nothing to say here, so maybe people who travel to Russia can write in comments how it went and if they in fact experienced racism there.
And this also goes further to show how the African is involved in evolution of languages across the globe. Now, this is Russian language we're talking about here, right? And there are a lot of persons who were against her, like they got triggered. They got triggered when she said that the Russian language was put together by a man of melanated origin, of African descent. Like they got triggered. And the question is, why should you be triggered when this is the truth? Oh, no, he's not the only one. Defense was just coming in here and everybody was defending their own opinion. He's not the only one. There were others who were there, which is the truth. But the very recent one is Alexander, whose great grandfather is African. So what are we saying? We are saying that there is this cordial and ancient connection between the Africans and Russia that cannot be overemphasized. And I think that we should keep talking about this because when you look into the world wars, how Russia had helped African countries, you discover that there's a particular connection that these people have with the melanated people. And you also see how Putin just, tried his best to expose to the whole world the truth that white supremacy have been hiding about the melanated community. You understand again that, yes, this can only be done by a man who has something of African in his blood. Yes, what I'm saying, I'm not saying that. I just hope you understand me. The reason why Russia would always have something to do with Africans and those of African descent is because there is a connection that cannot be severed. That is the truth. Instead of, betraying Africans for Europe and America, they would prefer to betray Europe and America for the melanated community. And that's exactly what Putin showed to the world when he came up with received evidence to let the world know that, hey, it is white supremacy that had made it look like the white man is the gods, and goddesses. White man and white women are gods and goddesses. But the fact is that it was originally the melanated people.
So, a lot of Westerners see many African people siding with Russia and think that Africans have been propagandized to think that evil Russia is good. But in reality, it is you, Westerner, who has been propagandized to think the West is good and Russia is evil. Because for at least the past 300 years, the big bad guy in Africa has not been Russia, it's been Western Europe and America. I mean, Russia didn't murder and enslave millions of Africans. Western Europe did that. Russia didn't colonize Africa and wipe out and erase thousands of years of culture and heritage and send its people into slave labor camps. The West did that. Russia didn't build roads only from the mines to the ports to facilitate the mass pulverization, ravaging and stripping of Africa's natural resources. The West did that. But do you know what Russia did do? After 1945, when all the colonized people in Africa began to rise up against the British, French, Portuguese, American and Belgian oppressors, do you know who was there giving the freedom fighters guns, ammo, supplies, medical care and training? Russia was. When the ANC began to fight back against the Western-funded apartheid in South Africa, do you know who was there supporting the fight for freedom? Russia was. There is a reason that to this day the flag of Mozambique still has an AK-47 on it. It's because the tools of liberation from the most oppressive occupation in human history came from Russia. So the reason so many African people will laugh in your face, Westerner, when you tell them Russia is evil is because you are the one who is propagandized and has fully consumed fantastical history where the West is somehow the good guy. The reality is, the West has always been the villain in Africa. It is still the villain in Africa, as the West to this day continue to fund violence across African nations and assassinate African leaders, so Western corporations can still steal all of Africa's resources under the cover of mass violence and manufactured instability. So yes, even though the Soviet Union is long gone and the Russia of today is a very, very different place, many Africans will never forget that the only European country that ever showed up for African liberation is Russia, and no amount of Western propaganda will ever erase that fact. Because the only people who believe the West did anything good in Africa are brainwashed Westerners. Anyway, something to think about.
We have no contradiction basically with any African country. And the level of trust and liking towards each other is very high. Primarily due to the fact that in the history of our relations with the African continent, there was never even a shadow of a trouble. We never exploited the African nations. We never did anything inhumane on the African continent. On the contrary, we have always supported Africa and Africans in their fight for independence and sovereignty to create some certain basic conditions for development of the economy. Now, these days, we need to have a new approach. I think that if there is anything in common, then they all care about creating a conducive security environment. Because these neo-colonial tools that were preserved in the economy, I mean the Western countries, and in security sphere as well. And together, that gave a certain advantage and the possibility to use these neo-colonial tools. People got tired of that, especially since there was no great revenue from that. I can only repeat myself that during our meetings at summits, and bilaterally as well, the Africans never ask or beg for anything. They never extend a demanding hand. They're developing very fast, and they know that they have resources and capacities. They're asking for only one thing, to build a natural and mutually beneficial cooperation. That's what we want as well. We cannot do that at the government level as it was being done in the Soviet Union. What we're trying to do is to create conditions for the work of our leading companies, especially since the investment potential of our companies is very high.
I wish there was Russia aid. And I thank them, they gave us fertilizer. Before it came here and it was diluted and added other things, but they gave us fertilizer, so we are grateful to Russia. I feel it's a high time that Russia in itself decided to work with Africa. It's a high time, like when they come to South Africa, they say, we are starting something Russia. You know, the equivalent of USAID. I mean, we have the Germans, they have what they used to call GTZ, now it's GIZ. The Danish, Danida, they have something they do here. Almost every other country, Portugal, but almost every other country is doing something in Africa. And that endears us to them. Russians, we know you're good at nuclear physics. That's why you make the weapons you make. I mean, take a few Kenyans, take them to your country, let them run that, then let them go there and be schooled in nuclear science, in nuclear physics, and let them. So I feel that as Russia goes about doing these things, they need to know that they've not had a hold on Africa. And we are not asking them to have a hold on Africa. We are asking them to have a partnership with Africa, because China is a step. They have not gotten as far as the US has gotten. But China has made a lot of inroads in Africa, and China is trading with Africa.